the father of the atomic bomb and its creation. J. Robert Oppenheimer played a crucial role in the invention of the atomic bomb. His remarkable intelligence led to a great triumph of engineering and science. But with Oppenheimer's invention of the atomic bomb, it also led to great tragedy and death, and could even possibly be the key to world destruction. On August 6, 1945, at 8:15 a.m., the American B-29 heavy bomber aircraft, the Enola Gay, dropped the first atomic bomb ever used in war. This bomb was named Little Boy, and it detonated over the Japanese city of Hiroshima, wiping out 90% of the city and killing over 80,000 people instantly. 3 days later, the United States would drop another atomic bomb, named Fat Man, on the Japanese city of Nagasaki, killing around 40,000 people. After the dropping of Fat Man and Little Boy, Japanese Emperor announced his country's surrender, during which he talked about the power of a new and most cruel bomb, thus ending the Second World War. The first steps towards the creation of the atomic bomb occurred in 1939, the same year as the start of World War II. On August 2, 1939, when in a letter to the President of the United States, Albert Einstein wrote about the use of nuclear energy, writing, "It may become possible to set up a nuclear chain reaction in a large mass of uranium, by which vast amounts of power and of new radium-like elements would be generated." This letter led to Roosevelt assembling the Committee on Uranium, and it was codenamed the S-1 Committee. A man by the name of J. Robert Oppenheimer began to surface within the government's list of obvious candidates to be director of the S-1 Committee, that's purpose was to develop an atomic bomb. Oppenheimer was a theoretical physicist and a professor of physics at Berkeley. Oppenheimer was ecstatic at the opportunity of working on the project. At first, Oppenheimer had trouble getting security clearance because he had friends that were known communists. So in order to be able to work on the bomb, Oppenheimer had to cut all ties with his communist friends. Once the US government gave Oppenheimer security clearance, they took him to Bohemian Groves, where Oppenheimer attended the first meeting of the highly secretive S-1 Committee, which took place on December 18, 1941. Due to the S-1 Committee not having all the necessary resources to construct the bomb, in September 1942, the military became involved, establishing the Manhattan Engineer District, codenamed the Manhattan Project. This project was under the command of General Leslie Groves. On October 8, 1942, Robert Oppenheimer was appointed the director of the Manhattan Project by General Groves. Many people were hesitant toward Oppenheimer being the director of the laboratory that would build the atomic bomb. When it came to whether he was qualified enough for this project, one Berkeley scientist even said he couldn't run a hamburger stand. On November 16, 1942, Oppenheimer and Groves went to New Mexico to look for a site to build the Manhattan Project, when Oppenheimer proposed a nearby place called Los Alamos as a site for the secret weapons laboratory. 2 days later, the Army bought the Los Alamos School to be the site of the Manhattan Project. Years after the construction of the project on Los Alamos, Oppenheimer said, "I'm responsible for ruining a beautiful place," referring to how they constructed the Manhattan Project on top of a beautiful school. The construction of the Manhattan Project at Los Alamos began right away, and the site was up and running at Los Alamos within months. The United States government did everything it could to gather engineers, physicists, and mathematicians to help with the Manhattan Project. Hundreds of these people would be needed to accomplish this feat and build the atomic bomb. As the Manhattan Project progressed, the people working on the project saw that Oppenheimer was a perfect fit as director. Scientist Hans Bethe said, "Los Alamos might have succeeded without him, but certainly only with much greater strain, less enthusiasm, and less speed." In December 1943, Niels Bohr arrived at Los Alamos. Niels Bohr was a Danish physicist who helped devise the quantum theory. Bohr brought up the possibility that an arms race may result from the development of this bomb, and Bohr proposed that the Soviet Union should be warned that it is no threat to them, but his proposition was shot down very quickly. By late 1944, the topic of morals and politics came up while building the atomic bomb, and some of the scientists at Los Alamos started to voice their concerns that arose with the moral dilemmas of the atomic bomb. After the scientists' concerns became known, there was a seminar, and the topic was whether the country is doing the right thing using this weapon on real human beings. Oppenheimer made a persuasive argument that made many scientists realize that although the creation of the atomic bomb will tragically lead everyone to live in fear of the weapon's capability, it might also be a great triumph and end all war and future wars. In early 1945, as a few scientists began to meet and discuss their thoughts on the bomb, where they discussed questions such as, what will this terrible weapon do to this world? Are we doing something good or bad? While these discussions continued, Oppenheimer again spoke at one of the meetings and made a convincing argument to why the bomb needs to be created, regardless of moral concerns. On April 12, 1945, word of Franklin Roosevelt's death spread to Los Alamos. After learning of the president's death, the people of Los Alamos held a memorial for him. After the memorial, Oppenheimer said, "While Roosevelt was a great architect, perhaps Truman will be a good carpenter," meaning that he hopes President Harry S. Truman can build off the great things that Roosevelt started. A month later, Truman wrote Oppenheimer regarding the reasons why America should build the atomic bomb, regardless of morals, and even if it results in an arms race. Truman said that if a race in the production of atomic bombs should become unavoidable, the prospects of this country cannot be expected to be good. About a month after Truman's letter, on June 16, 1945, Oppenheimer wrote an agreement recapping the scientific panel's recommendation on immediate use of nuclear weapons. The first test of the atomic bomb's detonation was codenamed Trinity, and it occurred a month later on July 16, 1945. 2 days before the scheduled test, Oppenheimer checked into the Hilton Hotel in Albuquerque, near where the test would take place. That night, the people with Oppenheimer recalled that he tried to calm everyone's anxiety, along with his own, by reciting a stanza from the Gita that he had translated, and it said, "In battle, in forest, at the precipice, in the mountains, on the dark sea, in the midst of javelins and arrows, in sleep, in confusion, in the depths of shame, the good deeds a man has done before defend him." The test explosion was scheduled at 5:30 a.m. on July 16, 1945, and at 5:10 a.m., a voice across the loudspeakers outside of the control rooms announced, "It is now 0-20 minutes." As the time of the detonation drew near, the people viewing the bomb were handed dark glasses to protect their eyes from the flash. Richard Feynman was standing 20 miles from the Trinity site and had decided not to wear the dark glasses, but instead sat in a nearby truck so he could see the flash, but still have his eyes protected by the windshield from the harmful UV rays. He described the explosion as a big ball of orange and says that he did not hear the bang for a minute and a half after the explosion. Another scientist described that for a moment when the explosion had happened, he thought something had gone wrong and that the whole world had gone up in flames. From 20 miles away, they could still feel the heat of the explosion on their skin. And as the fact that the Manhattan Project was triumphant in having successfully built and tested the first atomic bomb, the tragedy of its power began to settle in. A little over a month after the Trinity test, the United States used this newfound weapon of mass destruction to end World War II. And on October 16, 1945, only months after the U.S. victory, Oppenheimer said, "If atomic bombs are to be added as new weapons to the arsenals of warring worlds, or the arsenals of nations preparing for war, then the time will come when mankind will curse the names of Los Alamos and Hiroshima." While Oppenheimer is seen as the father of the atomic bomb because of his crucial part in leading the Manhattan Project, after Oppenheimer saw the sheer destruction of the atomic bomb, he was against the further development of the weapon, and resigned from his position later that year. 10 years after the bombs dropped in Japan, there was a television documentary where Robert Oppenheimer talked about seeing the horrendous destruction of his creation at the Trinity site, saying,
"We knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.